I started learning programming in about 2016, and after a while reached a limit where I didn't feel like I was making real progress. So I decided to take a programming bootcamp, and from there got my first programming job. And for those of you looking for your path into programming, you might be considering if you should be self-taught or considered a more structured path. And today I'm hoping to talk about the benefits of programming bootcamps so that you can be more prepared to decide if it's the right path for you. And if so, how to maximize the value that you get out of it. And to help explore that idea today, I'm joined by Tam Kbeili, who is the founder of several startups, including the Code Code Developer BootCamp, which has now become the Code Code Developer College, which currently offers an Elixir and Phoenix program, and also a platform called Codecast, which allows developers to stream and record programming content that gives viewers direct access to the code as it's being written. We also work together at Applicar, which is a marketplace that connects international students with universities and colleges. Tam has a wealth of experience both teaching and employing new developers, so there should be a great opportunity for the Elixir newbies out there who want to know more about the path from aspiring newbie to employable developer. So Tam, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Brooklyn. It's my pleasure to be here.
Really happy that you came out. So you founded CodeCore in 2008 because there was a demand for developers in Vancouver, BC, where you and I are both from. And I'm curious, for new or aspiring developers looking for their first job, is that demand still there, or has the industry changed?
Oh, absolutely. I think the demand continues to grow for developers all the time. I do grant you most companies do prefer to have intermediates or senior developers, but that, the junior developers become intermediates and seniors, leaving gaps for the junior developers. So in terms of demand, I would say, indeed, it keeps growing. I keep getting requests for friends looking for developers, and, you see job postings everywhere. So, yeah.
Yeah, I see that a lot in the industry. It's an unfortunate negative feedback loop that we have right now, which is that some companies aren't willing to hire new developers and they're only looking for seniors, but that creates this weird problem where you're not training anyone to become a senior. And so now there's this talent shortage and there's a lack of senior developers. And that makes the marketing behind programming kind of interesting sometimes, because people say, man, there's so many jobs, so much demand. But I find that the experience as a junior is that it can be very hard to actually get to the place where you are an employable developer. And so for some people, that path is going through university so that you can get co-op programs. For some people, it's being a self-taught developer. And I'm curious to ask you, what are the main benefits of going to a boot camp compared with teaching yourself to code? Why is that something that people should consider?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I mean, as you know, I have founded the CodeCore BootCamp in 2013. And a large percentage of the people I've hired for Applicar and for Codecast are actually bootcamp graduates. So, and on the flip side, I did work with people who were self-taught in the past, and I did hire people who were self-taught. So they're absolutely both completely valid paths to becoming a developer. At the core of it, it's really how much passion you have. How much do you truly enjoy the process of coding, right? It's one of those professions that if you don't enjoy it, it's going to be really a struggle to continue with it. It's because it's a challenge after challenge. And if you're not that person who enjoys those challenges, you're going to struggle with the industry, period. But if you are that type of person who enjoys problem solving and who enjoys that process, then yeah, multiple paths, including, the traditional college university path, but there's also the bootcamp or self-teaching path. Now, I would say the biggest advantage of going to a bootcamp is just the acceleration of how fast you can get into the industry. In terms of teaching materials that bootcamps offer, it's good and it's usually curated. It could be a little bit better. So that's, I think, the first value add is that the bootcamp curates the information and usually narrows it down to say, like, back end, front end, or a mix of both for you to basically study. Well, when you go out there, there's a lot of information. And unfortunately, some of it can be outdated. Some of them could be lower quality. Some of it could be not explained in the best way. So you may think it's your problem while it's the problem of the teaching. So I'd say that's the one spot that, the first bit that a bootcamp would add in terms of value. There's nothing proprietary about what any bootcamp teaches. Indeed, many of them put their curriculum, they open source it, they put it online, so you could actually see what the bootcamps are teaching. Now, the second thing that I think bootcamps help with is help through that struggle, and that usually takes different shapes. So, many of you probably seen that confidence versus knowledge graph. If not, maybe if you can put it in the show notes, Brooklyn, that would be great. So initially you have
Absolutely.
high confidence but low skills, but you think you know the world, and then as you get into it, that flips completely. The confidence gets shattered once you hit a few problems that seem easy, but then you find difficulty to solve them, and then that path flattens out, and then you become both skilled and confident. Now, that period in between, some people call it the desert of despair for good reasons. And I've seen people leave programming altogether because of that period right there, because there's just nobody to kind of hold their hand, support them, But when you're in an environment where people are in the same shoes, you support each other. And there's also, more importantly, TAs or teachers that help you get unstuck and then help re-explain to you the little bits and pieces where you get stuck there, that, sometimes you may not find the right support if you're doing it on your own. Sometimes you may. So I would say here, to do it properly, to like a self-study there, it's best to have a mentor that helps you through that period. And then after let's say you've learned the materials and everything, another value add for bootcamps that we used to work really hard on is to make connections with the industry and to smooth out getting your first job. Again, companies are biased toward hiring junior developers, some of them. And I'm on both sides. I'm half entrepreneur, half developer. So I could see it from the business side that you have a ton of work that you need done. And that's why sometimes the priority is to get somebody who can hit the ground running and just do it, versus a junior where you need to invest in their knowledge for a number of months before they become productive. That said, companies should invest, and we do it. In every company I do, I've hired juniors. It's keeping the right ratio, I think, between juniors and developers and senior and intermediates is the right approach. That said, here, what bootcamps do is they make connections with companies, whether in town or remotely. They help them in the process of hiring. They help them in the process of, in some cases, training as well. And in Canada, for example, we used to even help employers to show them what grants are available to subsidize even the salary of some of these developers, whatever it takes to get our graduates into the door. And that worked very well. And I think that may be a hurdle for being self-taught. So again, in short, honestly, I think both paths, they can lead to it if you know what you're up against. The only thing I would say is if you want to do it on your own, try to find a good mentor to guide you through the process. The mentor can show you what materials are good, what's irrelevant, what's outdated. The mentor can help you through these rough periods where you feel you want to just give up on programming altogether. And the mentor may or through their connections help you get into the job as well, get into the industry. So that would be kind of my overall advice from based on my experience. Sorry, it's a very long answer, Brooklyn, but I hope it kind of conveys the points there.
Absolutely, there was a ton of really useful thoughts there, and yeah, I had that same experience when I was trying to teach myself. I found that what you're trying to do if you're trying to be self-taught is you need to figure out what you need to learn when you know the least about what there is to learn. And creating that path as someone who doesn't already know it, you look at it in hindsight and you're like, oh, I could have totally learned that. All I need to do is learn this, 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 and this. But when you don't know what's out there, you can spend so much time learning something that completely doesn't matter and not be actually learning the things that really do matter. And so having that programming bootcamp or someone who can put that material together for you is huge. And that I remember because I got my start at CodeCore. I remember that talk on the Desert of Despair or the Valley of the Despair. All I remember is that big dip in the graph that was like, here's how you're going to feel. You're going to feel really good and then really terrible and then okay. And you're going to be about okay for the rest of your career. and having that preparation and knowing, hey, look, this is going to be hard and that's okay. And the effect of, I think it's called the Dunning-Kruger Effect that you were referring to before.
Exactly.
That feeling of, I remember when I first, I rated myself as a developer when I first started, and my hubris, my ego, I was like, I'm probably about a 7 out of 10 developer-wise, and I just started learning, so that wasn't true. And the more I got into it, the more that number shrank and shrank and shrank. And it went down from like a 4 to a 2 to now I'm fractions. Now I'm like a 0.2, probably 0.01, something like that. And yeah, as you learn more, you realize how much you don't know and how much there is to learn. And it puts everything into perspective. So it's funny. Exactly. The people I've met who have been the most experienced have almost always been the most humble about it as well, because they understand what they don't know. And
there's new paradigms that come up every day. Like now I feel so much in the dark for all the blockchain development that's happening, for instance, right? Which is a completely different way to program and to code. And I feel that I'm absolutely zero over there. So as you learn more and as you grow in your career, you realize how much is out there and how much new stuff come up every now and then too.
Exactly. You can devote your whole life to one thing and still not know half of what there is to know. It's turtles all the way down. It could be wild. I'm curious to talk about how you can maximize the benefit you get out of bootcamp, because you talked before about that support system. And one of the biggest things that I found, the biggest benefit of going to a more structured course was having people who were learning with me, who were in it together, and kind of that literal bootcamp, like army bootcamp feeling of we're going to work hard. We're all in this together. We're here to support each other. Having people you could go to ask questions, whether that's your classmates or TAs or teachers, and even the benefit of having people ask you questions. I found that would reinforce what you knew about things. And I'm friends with some of those people to this day. Like those were some of my most meaningful long-term friendships came out of that boot camp. So how do you, if you're going to go do a boot camp, you've decided that's the right path, what have your most successful graduates done differently than others? How do you get the most value out of that experience?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and we used to get it a lot. And what I would say, the first step is I would certainly, when for the duration of the boot camp and even a little bit after, try to just have zero distractions if possible. Like basically people will tell us, can I have a part-time job? Can I have can I continue with these, some things that require like a significant time investment of some sort? We were like, this is a boot camp. So the idea of the boot camp is that you basically block the whole thing off for the period. And while you're looking for a job, the job hunting period is also quite intensive. So that's kind of the first advice I would give somebody. If it means setting some money aside so you don't have to work during that period or a few months after, do that. If it means getting support from the spouse or roommates or whatever your situation is, get support from this. But just this period, treat people like, we used to use the metaphor, tell your mom I'll call you in 6 months, basically, because I'll be so busy, so heads down, I won't have time. Because again, it is intensive, it is hard, and we tell this to everybody. Even though we wanted people to sign up for the bootcamp, but we would be like, this will be one of the hardest things you've ever done. So just make sure you're as prepared for it as possible. The second common pattern that I've noticed people who were very successful at it is to do as much study preparation before. And sometimes that could be, there's, again, like the resources we used to give our Code Academy. Again, I've been I've sold Code Core Bootcamp in 2018, so it's been 3 years, and I know a lot can happen in 3 years. So this information may be a little bit outdated, but again, we used to tell people go do a lot of the Code Academy courses over there. And the second one is free Codecamp. That was also one of the good resources out there. There's different tracks on free Codecamp and lots of good information. So the students who came already knowing the stuff we want to teach, they simply took the advantage of the bootcamp to elevate their skills to the next level or to master the things that they had gaps in. So it doesn't hurt to hear it twice or 3 times or 4 times, as long as you master it. And that's what people realize a lot, that you think you understand it sometimes, but as you dig into it, you realize you have gaps in your knowledge. And the other thing is that you realize is you understand it, but maybe you don't understand when to use it or how to use it in combination with other things, which is kind of at the core of the problem solving that people need to cultivate to become excellent developers. So if they've studied beforehand, and again, I know you have, for example, if they want to do Elixir, you have good resource that you keep. Figure out a good person that will give you some guidance out there. Study as much as possible, and then go to the bootcamp to just think of it as like, yeah, you know what, I'm already in shape, but I want to take my skills to the next level. That I've noticed those people, they tend to get jobs almost instantly after the bootcamp, and they tend to go a little bit far as well and get more out of the bootcamp. Because we do say it's like drinking from a fire hose. So, if you're already prepared, if you're already studied to an extent, then you'll get a lot more out of the bootcamp.
That makes a lot of sense. And having those different avenues that you're doing your own self-learning, seeing if it's for you. I mean, obviously a boot camp is a big commitment. That's probably something you do after you've already decided programming is at least interesting to you. You've experimented with a little bit. I'm curious what you think about, is programming for everyone? Can anyone learn to program? I hear a lot of this message out there in the ecosystem, which is, you have to be super passionate and hardcore and work 16 hours a day if you want to succeed in this industry. And my experience has been that, hey, passion helps in life. And if you love what you're doing, you're going to enjoy it more. But getting into the industry and working in programming, I was scared away by that sort of messaging, even though I think I'm someone who does have some passion. So what do you think about people getting into it? How do people just see if it's for them? Who's a good fit for programming and who can learn it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say everybody can learn programming to a point, right? And then after this, it's I think you will know if you like programming or not, but I think everybody should, again, when you say passion, I think sometimes words could be loaded or could be misleading or something like this. So the core idea here is that and I honestly, I don't know if this just goes for programming, probably goes for any other profession, but if it's going to be hard for you to do day in and day out. It's a struggle. It's going to be a struggle, and that may be for anything, but it could be for kind of some professions. It's that are more mechanical, that you could go through it even though you may not like it. For programming, you will hit those walls, and you will just, if you don't enjoy it, and it may really hinder the progress of your career. And that's why I say, the passion or liking the thing is good for kind of the long term. Now, as in general, I think everybody can learn programming, and I think should learn programming to a point, even for the purposes of automating simple tasks or, understanding what programming entails. When I was doing Code Core Bootcamp, and I think they still offer that program till now, we had one called the Fundamentals. And the fundamentals was for these people. It'd be I want to see, do I actually like this? Do I want this as a profession? Or can I just maybe do something take something out of this whole programming thing? Or is it just not for me? Then they would take this part-time course, used to be over 5 weeks. And they figure out at the end of it, a lot of them will be well, you know what? Programming is not for me. It was just a small course that I've taken. I know what it takes. I won't pursue it. While others will be this is the best thing I've ever done. Let me just switch to it and let me just go 100% in and just just dive headfirst into it, right? So I think at the end of the day, you just have to try it. Luckily, there's a ton of free resources online. And there's also like these courses you could take, I think, in almost every major city, which is like, kind of like our fundamentals course, where intro to programming kind of a course, if you prefer an instructor-led type of a setting, whether it's remote or it's in person. And then see if that programming is for you. And I think you will take something out of it even if it's not programming itself, like just the problem solving aspect of it, the analytical thinking aspect of it, or something of that nature that will tell you whether this is for you or not for you, right? And but I think everybody, like we all learn basic arithmetics in or to an extent of math in K to 12. I think everybody should learn some basics of programming, I guess, to assess whether that is something for them or not. And in my opinion, there's a lot you could take from programming besides just being a programmer.
Absolutely. I found that ability to break down problems, understanding input and output, and just breaking things into a series of tasks that you need to achieve. That type of analytical thinking can be really useful. And it's also important to note that while there are those of us who love the implementation details and the nitty-gritty of the program and how all of that works, there's also lots of different positions in the industry that might be more suited to different personality types. Like I have a friend who prefers the people side of programming, is a lot more interested in the mentorship and helping people and working with teams and those sort of more management side of things. So there's many different paths, and if the nitty-gritty of programming doesn't necessarily interest you day to day, there's lots of different opportunities within the industry as well for different personality types.
Absolutely, for sure. Yeah, I mean, like also, like story, like my two brothers actually both took the boot camp and became developers. One of them used to be an industrial engineer, and he just realized while he was doing his industrial engineering work, the part he enjoyed most was the programming part. He was doing some SQL, some little bit of coding on the job, and then he decided, well, this is kind of like, he wanted to be like, well, this is what I think I want to do day to day. And then he took the boot camp, and now he's 100% focused on development. More in an engineering, more in a management part right now. But to your point, there is like, you just try it and see. You could become a manager. There's actually a big place for good people who know, like, say, design or UI UX, and they can mix with even basic like JavaScript and then some HTML and CSS programming. There's very few people who can mix those two skills together, because most programmers like me are terrible designers or UI developers. And there's designers who don't know how to put that into code. So those people can be quite valuable. And yeah, there's the management aspect of it. There is the data analytics aspects of it. There's so many things you can get into programming, if not just writing code day in, day out.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm a sticks and boxes designer myself. I am not good with Figma or mockups or any of that stuff. So having people who know that design and having people who can do both is, I think, a very powerful skill that you can leverage. So if you're more design focused, then there's opportunities for visual thinkers as well. I'd love to talk a bit about Codecast and Codecast for people who aren't familiar with it. That was actually my first experience doing video tutorials, and that helped me realize that I enjoy creating this type of educational material. So Tam, I'm going to ask you, I sort of talked a little bit about it at the start, but what is Codecast? What does it do differently than other educational websites, and what is it trying to accomplish?
Yeah, absolutely. So Codecast, basically, it's a platform that enables developers to stream record their screen or their webcam. But more importantly, it also captures code changes on every save. So every time you save, so you point it to a project while you're streaming, and every time you save, it takes a diff between the last state of the code and what you saved. So this way, as a learner, you basically see not only the video, which you can't copy paste from, which you can't see the entire all the files that are being worked on, but you're also able to basically see the diffs and browse all the files at any given point. So it came actually out of Code Core Bootcamp as a as a useful tool that we found students really like, and it enhanced the real-time experience of teaching, but also after the fact where they want to review that materials and possibly copy paste snippets of code to their own projects. Yeah, you could visit it at codecast.io. I am not focused on it as much. My friend Ryan is the CEO of it now, and he's basically running the company at the moment. I'm putting a lot more of my time into Applicar, which Brooklyn mentioned earlier. That said, I encourage all of you to check out Codecast, create content on it, and provide us feedback if how we can improve it and take it to the next level.
Yeah, we've talked about that value and benefit of teaching, and how by teaching something, it reveals what you didn't already know. It challenges the assumptions that you've made. You learn a ton by teaching. So if you're interested in creating content and putting up some videos, Codecast is a great place to do it. They also have some Elixir content on there. So if you're hoping to watch some Elixir videos, I always found whenever doing video tutorials, if they would have some sort of like code samples, like, oh, and you can go check out the project here. It's like, I'm not going to do that. So having that built in directly in the display is really cool. You can access the files just like you were using it like an editor, a read-only editor, and that part is really cool. So Tam, I want to talk about your experience at Applicar, and specifically, I know that you are interested in hiring people who are new to Elixir. You have some experience there. So what are you looking for as a founder, as a CTO? What are you looking for from a potential candidate? How do people stand out if they're looking to get into the Elixir industry?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I mean, we've hired, of course, you as our developer without prior Elixir experience, and we've hired even Emil, who's a junior out of Code Core Bootcamp, also with no Elixir experience. So the first thing I'm looking at is the excitement, enthusiasm about Elixir and about development in general, because I know from my experience that go a very long way. Because again, I can go back early to my career. I mean, one of my earliest jobs was Java at TELUS, which is a telco here in Canada, and I didn't know Java at the time, but because I was so passionate and so interested in programming, I used to put in a lot of time, hours, energy into learning Java. And that really accelerated my learning to a point that, I was able to be productive in, I think, a few months or something like that. And that's usually what we look for in when we hire somebody. So when we test people for our positions, we have them to debug us through the code, which is Elixir. We use primarily Elixir for Applicar, and also Codecast, by the way, is all Elixir. We test them to help us solve a bug within our code base. That approach has some challenges, but we've noticed that even when people don't know Elixir, they're at least their problem solving abilities and coding abilities, you could just make sense of the code. Elixir tend to be one of those languages that tend to be that the syntax is very elegant, in my opinion, that you could sometimes tell what the code is doing even without necessarily knowing the language in details. Now, needless to say, knowledge of Elixir is certainly a big plus. So I would say, like, try to, if you want to get into an Elixir job, my biggest advice is try to build some side project or contribute to open source projects with Elixir, because we do look at that when we're evaluating different profiles, and certainly it impresses us. And I know it's the case for many other employers, especially if you're a junior, that you have some open source project. It's good to have your own project and have it up there, and it's even better if you're able to contribute to a known open source project, no matter how small the contribution is, but that certainly speaks a lot. Brooklyn and I were even chatting the other day, and he was saying that the Elixir, actually, it's in a state where you could actually, even as a junior, go and contribute in so many other areas. It could be in educational context. It could be in contributing to a library that is not fully formed. So although the ecosystem is mature enough that you can easily build production level applications and push them, there's still enough there that you could actually go and say you've seen a library in some JavaScript or Rails that isn't yet into the Elixir and Phoenix system. You could basically work on porting a library like that, just again as an example. Or you've seen a library that's doing some of the work, but they still need help with all these other things. So you could work basically on implementing that feature for them. So that would be probably my biggest takeaway. It certainly impresses me and a lot of other developers to see that you have some open source code out there, showcasing your skills.
Awesome. Yeah, I found the same, that there's a lot of ways to get your portfolio together, or just to learn the skills you need to get into Elixir that aren't just build your own side project. Obviously, build your own side project is useful. You learn some things from there, but getting involved with open source, they often have small, very achievable issues on some of the repositories, unlike something like the JavaScript ecosystem that's just completely bloated and work is kind of everywhere. People really appreciate when you come on to an Elixir project, and there are very well-known Elixir projects like Wallaby or Elixir Schools, both of which I've gotten the chance to do some work with, that are really happy if you come in, and they'll be incredibly supportive because they're really looking for people who are willing to come in and help. And doing that small change, it's funny, something that takes you an hour will take up the same amount of space. It's a bit of a life hack. Something that takes you an hour takes up the same amount of space on your resume as something that took you 2 months. So there's lots of little things you can do, like to get ready to apply to Applicar and do that interview. I was writing about Elixir. I created a little blogging application to kind of understand the Phoenix framework, and you can do a lot to build up your resume in a pretty short period of time if you're willing to be creative. And anything you can do to teach, I think, is such a good path. Like I do Twitter summaries, for example. I'll post just some book that I'm reading. Right now it's Elixir in Action, and do a summary of the chapter that I read. The main takeaway is just anything you can do to share your experience and what you've learned. And that's something you can do no matter what your experience level is. So, finding those ways to get into it and to stand out. And Tam, do you have anything else to say in regards to, it seems like programming and interviewing are often two completely different skills. And interviewing candidates is something you've had to do a lot. And out of all the interviews I've ever done, I really enjoyed your process. I felt like it came the closest to figuring out, hey, can you actually do the job, as opposed to, can you jump through a hoop and do this algorithm question for me? Has nothing to do with what you're going to do day to day, but we want to know if you understand dynamic programming for some reason. So is there anything else you would recommend to devs who are looking to prepare for interviews, things that they should look out for? Yeah,
that's an excellent question. I mean, in my opinion, in general, I think the burden goes on to the hiring companies to improve their hiring process. Again, I don't claim that ours is the best out there or anything like this. That said, I do have issues with those kind of algorithmic type of interviews where you don't actually do day to day. Like you're working for a startup that you're not going to be doing those kind of things. I mean, I understand if you're working, say, at, interviewing at Google, Amazon, you need to go this low level and you need to actually deeply understand some of these algorithms for the day-to-day work. But for the majority of startups, which where most of us work, you don't need those things. That said, a lot of interviewers still do that approach. The biggest advice I would give, I mean, we used to do entire training for our Code Code grads to help them prepared for the interview, and there's a lot you could do. But maybe if I were to pick a couple things, the first thing is do as much research about the company before you go to the interview as possible, and do it just beyond just technology. Try to understand about them, their business. If you can track down who is interviewing you, you could figure out more information about them on LinkedIn, like maybe their previous jobs, previous technologies they worked in, maybe general interests, things like this. the more information you can accumulate about the company and the interviewers, the better you will be. I think there is a lot less things to talk about. It shows your interest in their company and their industry, which goes beyond the job. And also, again, it could reveal some things you haven't thought about before that you could bring to the table from your previous background or something. The second tip I will give is try, if you can, to turn the interview into a conversation. Sometimes, we try to do it that way. Honestly, in every job I've done, I try to make the interview a conversation for two primary reasons. One is to get to know the person a little bit more and they fit our culture. And then more important, actually maybe three reasons, and then learn about their communication skills, which is just as important in some cases as programming skills. And number three is to learn about their thinking and problem solving process, which means that even if they don't get to the solution, at least I know that they have enough to get to similar solutions as they encounter in the future. And again, we did hire people who didn't solve the thing that we give them, but they've communicated well enough and they've showed us enough about their thinking process that we know they'll figure it out given enough time and given maybe a less stressful interview situation. So if you're able to, try to turn the interview into a conversation by asking questions. And you would be surprised of how many interviewers actually are open to that. So if you're stuck on something, start to verbalize your thinking thought and then start to ask questions to the interviewer, right? Again, it's not always going to be received positively. Some interviewers will treat it like this is a strict test. But in many, many cases, I would say in the vast majority of times, the interviewer will actually start to respond. And that not only may open up clues for you to move forward, but will also show the interviewer that you have the problem-solving skills, you have the abilities to figure it out, giving a better situation than, say, an interview, right? So yeah, those are the tips I would give for you. So prepare as much as possible about the company you're doing, and then turn the interview into a conversation if you have the ability or the chance to do so.
I really like that. Yeah, I've almost exclusively worked with people who I was already friends with in the industry, already had some background with. So I've always found those have been a lot more fun, a lot more enjoyable than the interviews that felt very formal and strict. So having that conversation, I found that actually pair programming, if you can get experiences to pair program, talking things through about the code helped prepare me for the style of interview that you do, which is that talking through your process and learning to talk about code. Because if you're learning on your own, you're often doing so silently. You're not, unless you're a crazy person who talks to themselves while they program, then you're not necessarily going to be talking through. You're probably going to be sitting in silence. So if you can pair program, that really cultivates and develops that skill of talking through what you're doing, which I think really shines in that interview setting. Tam, I have had a ton of fun talking about this with you. I think there's a lot of outstanding info for some Elixir newbies who are hoping to learn and grow. Is there anything else that you would be sad that we didn't talk about before we kind of do our close off here? Anything else that you wanted to mention?
If the only thing I would mention is, just to emphasize, I think you guys are in the right space by going for Elixir in general as a language, as a framework of choice. I have been a Rails developer myself, and I've made a career teaching Rails for many years. And I do think Elixir has a very bright future. I think even though it's become mainstream with many big companies, I think Discord is probably the most notable one, PepsiCo, and then there's a bunch of other bigger companies using Elixir. But I think it has a lot to go because, just more and more people realizing that you could write code that is both elegant and performant. And there's all these benefits you get from the concurrency and fault tolerance that you get in building Elixir apps a certain way. So, and the ecosystem keeps growing and keeps getting better. So I would say, I think you guys are in a great space. In my opinion, again, I know it's self-serving because we hire a lot of Elixir developers, but I do think it's a great language, and Phoenix is a great framework to pursue. So that's the one thing I would say. Just pursue that and contribute to the community. It'll really help you. Like, really thank you, Brooklyn, for what you're doing. I know I should be doing a lot more of basically generating content and putting stuff out there for Elixir, because that is also what will help the community grow and what will help more people getting into it. But I think you're in the right space. I would highly encourage you to continue on it and to contribute as much as you can to the community.
Thank you, Tam. And thank you so much for sharing your experience as well and coming on. And I know that people have had the chance to learn a ton from you. I am incredibly grateful to you for helping me get my first step into the programming industry. I love that we've come full circle. You helped me learn how to code, learn how to program, helped me get my first job. And now it's all kind of coming back here, and now we work together and we can get on this podcast together. And I hope to
pretty sure I'll learn a lot from you in programming one day, like I did with many other students as well. So hopefully I'll learn a lot from you one day as well.
The student becomes the master. That's how it goes. Once I can take the cricket from your hand, then
exactly.
it's a constant learning process, and that's definitely what I love about it. Alrighty, well, I hope awesome. You Elixir newbies out there learned a lot, are more prepared to decide if a bootcamp or maybe a structured course is the right path for you to get into the industry. As always, you can chat with me on Twitter. I am at Brooklyn J. Myers. Tam, is there anywhere you'd like to send people, maybe the Codecast link, or anywhere you'd like to just do a last second pitch?
Yeah, sure. I mean, check out both Codecast and Applicar. I mean, Applicar maybe less relevant for people who wants to learn, but we will be looking to hire possibly in the next 6 months or something like that, probably earlier than this. I would also say check out Codecast.io. I have been promising to put a full series on Elixir at some point, and I will now. I'm making it more public, so I'll make sure I commit to that one. So hoping by the end of the year, I will put like a full series on Elixir on Codecast. But there's a lot of Elixir content, and again, if there's something you can contribute, will help you promote it as well. So check out Codecast too. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. I hope you have an excellent rest of your week, and I will catch you on the next episode. Thank you, Tam.
Thank you, Brooklyn. Have a great day. Bye.
You too. Take care.